This is over here. Go. If I were to cut from the front of your head, right, and just look at where your brain is, here's your cerebrum, here's your cerebrum. This is that falx cerebri that's separating the left and right half of your cerebrum. See how that works? Now, there is a little area of the corpus callosum right here that the left and right can communicate. Those little sinuses. They're not eyes. They look like an angry face or something, but it's not that at all. This is just a sinus. And then, now this is actually showing, see this coming out right here? This structure? That's not bone. What do you think that is? What? Yes. So this is the where it splits in the tentorium cerebelli, separating the cerebrum from your cerebellum. Right, do you see that? I want that to sink in because this is where it gets complex. Okay? This is where it gets a little, you got to start to use your brain and be able to visualize. Notice the attachment points of this, not here, because we know it attaches to the sphenoid, right? But it also attaches to the frontal bone, right? Comes up and attaches to the parietal bone. Comes back, has a big attachment. There's ridges in there. These are all attachment points. There's actually a falx cerebelli is down here. This is the tentorium cerebelli right here. This is the falx cerebri. So that's actually where they all come together. It's in here on the occiput, right? They run forward. They actually attach out here on the sides onto your temporal bones, right? Come all the way up and actually re-hit up in here. Don't worry about that because we haven't gotten to ethmoid and any of that stuff yet, really. Okay, so that's the attachment point of this structure, right? Now, imagine if my frontal bone goes this way, and my occiput goes that way. What's going to happen to that structure? It's going to twist. Now, so you're going to get a torque in here, right? And because the occiput attaches here, the whole tentorium is going to probably shift like this. And so, but because it's attached in the front, it's actually going to kind of shift. It's going to rotate as it shifts. When you look at this, you'll notice there's not a lot of space between the brain and the falx cerebri and the tentorium cerebelli. So when I torque that, I have to be moving the cerebrum, right? Because they're essentially attached. So I'm taking this cerebrum and I'm twisting it. Now, once you start to look at somatosensory maps and all this stuff, and you start to realize the parts of the brain that are close to this, all of those parts can be affected. Right? Why is it that that kid I talked to you about, when he sat down, he became dyslexic? Why did he become dyslexic?
Reacting?
Well, yeah, when he sat down, his brain, he had the big old shift in his cranium, and that shift moved these structures and created a misfiring that he couldn't process words properly. The vision center got affected. Now, the vision center is in the occipital lobe. Right? That's where your vision center of your brain is, in the occipital lobe. And you can see, if that occiput moves, wow, there's all sorts of structures around that. It's actually going to create a pretty large distortion and can create some visual disturbances. And he was having problems processing both visual and auditory. Auditory is in your temporal lobe. But he was having problems processing auditory and visual stimulus because of this.
He just happened to know
His was
standing up. Like, who knows that?
He had a big distortion, right? Not everyone has a 14 millimeter small hemipelvis. His was large enough that it was very easy to see the difference. If you have 14 millimeters sitting and 14 millimeters standing, you may not notice a change. You may not notice anything at all change. And so you'll just think, I'm dumb, right? You'll just think I'm dumb because I can't learn things as fast as everybody else. And it could just be structural, right? So this is why this is important. When you see these lines, they're not just lines on the chart, right? They're representative of this and what's going on. I don't care what's going on the outside of the head, really. I care what's going on the inside of the head, right? It's all what's inside that counts. It's so that's the picture. Like when you're thinking about this and you start to see this, right? Well, how come you saw the Sutherland cranial lesion chart? Yes, it had all, and it was all about the sphenobasilar synchondrosis. Can everybody spell sphenobasilar synchondrosis? No, it's important. The SBS. Why is the SBS so important? Right? Why does that create so many problems? Well, those are the attachment points. The sphenoid and the occiput are the two big attachment points of these structures inside. So when I start doing this and I start doing that, it's going to affect different parts because of that. So my symptoms are going to be different because of which part is being twisted. Right? That it's not a magical thing about that joint that goes, oh, that makes you have depression, right? No, it's your brain that makes you have depression, and it's your brain that's getting affected by this movement.
You said depression?
That's one of the things on the Sutherland chart.
That makes sense.
And one of the things is coordination issues, right? Well, that's because that's the one that the cerebellum gets affected more.
What is it, the sphenobasilar?
Synchondrosis. 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 Okay. All right. So, and that's what that just the joint is called between the sphenoid and the occiput. Do you know what kind of joint that is? Did we talk about what the name of the type of joint? The spheno and the
Cartilage.
Yeah, yes. It's a big, thick piece of cartilage, and it looks like almost. I'll tell you. I'll give you a hint. There's only two of these in the body. There's only two of these joints in the body, and one of them is here. One of them is right there, right? And the other one, there it is. The other one's right here.
No, it's the other one.
What was that?
No, it's not.
Well, the name of the type of joint is a cartilaginous bar joint. Okay, it's a bar joint. But what's unique about it, there's only two of them. You only get two cartilaginous bar joints in your body. One's in your pelvis, one's in your head. There's a lot of relationships between your head and your pelvis.
So it can shear like the pubic bone?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, there's I think I saw one down here somewhere. Sutherland stuff.
Yeah, it's in there.
Anyway, this thing, right? That little chart. It'll show you all the different stuff, right? The flexion, extension, torsion, side bending, lateral strain, vertical strain, compression. So lateral strain and vertical strain are the shearing that you're talking about, the vertical strain and lateral strain that it can do. But you can look, this is torsioning, this is side bending, right? So you can see why the torsioning, head, neck, back pain, severity, sinusitis, temporal bone dysfunction, scoliosis, eye motion problems. You start to see eye motion problems. You go, okay. And then you track where the oculomotor nerve runs.
Eye motion is in the lazy eye?
Eye motion, yeah, is in lazy eye or tracking issues. Right? And you start to look and you go, oh, it runs right next to this section, and that gets affected by the torsion. Right? So that you start to, once you start to look at the structures, like when he made this chart, like it was like 1920 or something, but when he made this chart, they didn't fully understand all of this. This was all done by, he saw it and he saw the symptoms and he just charted everything. He just saw a correlation between this and the symptoms. We now start to understand why, because back then they had no idea what parts of the brain did what. Right now we're starting to understand why he was seeing these symptoms when he saw these distortions. And that's where your brain should go. Your brain should go to not just, oh, I got to correct this because there's 3 vectors. That's just an outside kind of like, okay, the more of those there are, the more distortions that are creating problems that can create a problem in the brain. Right? That's why this piece is so important. Is because it's the direct brain, you're working on the person's brain. Right? Is what you're doing. And so that's really what you should be looking at. Oh, I have a deviated septum. Oh, I can't breathe. Well, what is that vomer doing to the sphenoid? And then what is that sphenoid's relationship to the occiput? And how is that affecting the whole? It may not just be breathing difficulties. Right? That could just be a sign of bigger things. And that's when anybody comes into you with any kind of neurological symptom, cranium first.
Cranium or specifically the...
Well, cranium in general.
In general?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just do all the measurements and correct it. You don't necessarily even have to know exactly what you're doing on the inside. Just see the measurements and correct them, right? If you're going to really explain it to them, you might need to know what's going on and doing all it. And remember how much we said education is a big part of them getting better and all of that stuff. But this is all in anatomy books, right? This isn't anything we're making up. There's nothing special. It literally is just moving structures is what we're doing. And so when you go and you see that occiput and it is like this, and you go, okay, that's Sicker's torque. That means both the tentorium and the falx are really twisted, right? And it's better if the temporal bones go the same direction, because now the whole sheet is just tilting. Does that make sense? Like if the front and the back both go this way, we're just doing this, which is actually less force on the brain and less problems than if you do that.
What if someone's like not currently experiencing any symptoms that they are aware of, and then you move their cranium around, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't feel like myself anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Not a lot, no. Not feeling like myself sometimes means I'm happier or I don't have any, right? Like lining it up never creates a problem, if that's what you're asking.
Because you get used to living in that
right.
distortion.
Unless you're like I don't know, a songwriter that needs to be depressed to write your songs or something like that, right? Like, like you use that and you write really dark, deep songs. And now I'm happy all the time and I can't do that anymore, right? That there would be a weird circumstance to make something like that happen. But no, lining these sheets up is always good. It makes for easier transmission of information. That's what it does. And so that's what we're trying to do. So that's the importance. Like that's the why is it so important that we line these things up?